Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Chapter 22. We're going to talk about respiratory systems. We're going to talk about gas exchange, how animals will bring in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. If we think about this in our own lives, obviously we call this process breathing. This process, we need to expand that definition of breathing, and by expanding it, we're going to change it and just call it gas exchange. The goal of breathing is to bring in oxygen so our cells can do cellular respiration like we talked about in Biology 1. In the process of burning our food molecules and turning them into energy, we make waste, and that waste is carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide has to be released from our bodies, and so we breathe out. We breathe in to get oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. This process, distilled down to its most basic events, are bringing in O2 and releasing CO2. This is called gas exchange. And all animals do this. All living things do this. They do gas exchange. But not all animals breathe. Not all living things breathe. Plants do gas exchange, they don't breathe. Fish do gas exchange, they don't breathe. Bugs do gas exchange, they don't breathe. We'll talk about all the different methods of breathing, all the different methods of doing gas exchange. So remember and just understand what I'm talking about. When I say the phrase gas exchange, it's okay. You can imagine breathing, but remember, when you're saying breathing, it's not just bringing in air and letting out air. It is specifically bringing in oxygen and then letting out carbon dioxide. So change your kind of mental definition of what it means to breathe. And then if you've done that, then fine. You can imagine these other things that we talk about as breathing. But it's bringing in O2 and releasing CO2. When we think about gas exchange, obviously we kind of default to human because this is what we're most familiar with. Bringing in oxygen so that oxygen can be carried throughout our entire body. Once to our cells, the mitochondria will use that oxygen as a waste product of burning up the foods that we eat. We're going to make carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide is a waste and has to go back out. And so the carbon dioxide gets sent back out. This does show the 4 stages of gas exchange. The first is called external respiration, the first is called pulmonary ventilation, bringing in respiratory gases. Once the air is in your lungs, it has to go from your lungs to your blood. That's called external respiration. Once the oxygen is in my blood, now I have to carry it, transport of gases. I have to transport it to my cells. Once it gets to the cells, now I have to release it. It has to get dumped out, and that's internal respiration. So the oxygen gets dumped. And then you got to follow it back again because the carbon dioxide has to go backwards. The first and probably oldest method of gas exchange is called integumentary exchange. Remember from the organ system chapter, we talked about the integumentary system. So integument is your skin. Well, the first and oldest method of animals doing gas exchange is called integumentary exchange, and that is breathing through their skin, doing gas exchange through their skin. It's very simple, not very complicated. The organisms that do this, cnidarians do it, most worms do it, even all the way up until some amphibians will do it. Most fish don't. Most fish do not do integumentary exchange, but most of your invertebrates do some amount of integumentary exchange with the exception of arthropods. And then, again, most vertebrates don't use integumentary exchange. However, amphibians do. Lots of amphibians do. One quick thing before we go on. It says that if you're going to do this, the skin needs to be moist. the reason why the skin has to be moist, why the skin has to be wet to be able to do integumentary exchange is a function of how we actually do this process called gas exchange, and that is blood does not take oxygen directly from air. Blood takes oxygen from water. So if you're going to do gas exchange, the oxygen has to dissolve into water first, and then the blood can take the oxygen from the water. So if you have dry skin, oxygen can't dissolve into water that's not there. So you can't breathe through dry skin. Same thing within your lungs. You have cleaned your glasses by breathing on them to get that condensation. Your lungs are also lined in a very thin film of water because blood can't take oxygen directly from air. It has to take it from water, which means the oxygen dissolves in the water first, and then the blood takes the oxygen from the water. So if you're going to do integumentary exchange, your skin has to be wet. The skin needs to be moist. Here we see the process of integumentary exchange. This is an earthworm. This right here is taking a cross section so we can see what the worm's skin looks like. And so here is the worm's skin. We see that the blood vessels, the arteries and veins, are coming up right up to the surface of the animal's skin. And that oxygen goes into this blood, carbon dioxide comes out, bad blood comes to the surface of the skin to dump the carbon dioxide, oxygen comes in, and then good blood is going to go back and get transported throughout the rest of the body. Integumentary exchange, breathing through their skin. Most invertebrates do integumentary exchange. Most invertebrates. A fairly major step up in the acquisition of oxygen are these things called gills. We've all heard of gills, and we know that gills are what fish use. Gills are really effective. Gills work very well in water. They only work in water. And the reason why is that gills are very thin, highly vascularized tissues. What it means is the reason why gills work in water and not in air is because the gill tissue is so thin to promote gas exchange that it's not strong enough to support itself. So the gills, these finger-like gills that are inside of, a fish's throat, as long as water is there to support those gills, they stay spread out, they stay separate, so that they can do this process called gas exchange. But once you bring them out into air, there's no more water now to support these very thin-skinned gills, and they just collapse. Like when a woman with long hair is in the pool, when she goes underwater and just sits there, her hair flows around her because the water is supporting each strand of hair, and it can just, surround her. When she comes out of the water, it's all plastered to her skull because the hair can't support itself. It doesn't have the water to support itself anymore, so it collapses. Now imagine if you were breathing through that and that it has to be spread out to get, maximum surface area for gas exchange. Come out of the water, and they all collapse, and then you would suffocate. Gills only work in water. Lots of animals have gills. It's not exclusively just fish. Lots of mollusks have gills, like aquatic snails have gills. We looked at nudibranchs. Nudibranchs have gills. Obviously, fish have gills. Lots and lots of invertebrates, aquatic invertebrates, will use gills. Now, I said in the last slide that most invertebrates do integumentary exchange. Lots of mollusks will actually do both. They will do some breathing through their skin and breathe through their gills. They can do both. Here we see how a gill is set up. Notice those very thin finger-like things I talked about within the throat of the fish. The way it works is that water carrying fresh oxygen comes in through the animal's mouth. This oxygenated water comes and passes through the gill. Deoxygenated blood comes from the heart and flows out into the gill. It picks up oxygen as it goes. This very efficient system strips most of the oxygen from the water, and now deoxygenated water flows out of the gill. Oxygenated blood goes back in to the cardiovascular system and then can be carried throughout the rest of the animal.